I'd like to call to order the December 6, 2016 meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. If everyone would please rise and join us in the invocation tonight to be delivered by Councilman Benny Johnson, and then the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we ask as we come together tonight for your guidance and blessings upon the business as we take it upon of the parish, as well as blessings of the people who live in this parish. Make sure that we do the right things by them and representing them on a day in, day out basis. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item number 2 is roll call. Madam Secretary, let the record show that all councilmen are present with the exception of Councilman Aaron Lawler. Number 3 is the public comment period. Anyone wishing to speak tonight on any of our agenda items, and we have 4, 5, 6, and 7. Please fill out a public speaker card and list the item at which you would like to speak, and you will be given time to do so when that item is called up. Moving along to item number 4. Approval of the August 2nd, 2016 Strategic Planning minutes. Chair will entertain a motion to approve. It's been moved to approve the minutes by Councilman Dawson. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Johnson. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Item number 5 is an impact fee grant discussion to be led tonight by Councilman Bill Dawson. But before we turn it over to Bill, I do have a public speaker card on that. Mr. Denson Phillips, if you'd please come up, sir. And if you will state your name and where you live for the record, sir, we'd appreciate it.
All right. My name is Denson Phillips. I live at 9103 Pertree Road, and that's Santa Maria, Louisiana, 70774.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay. I'd just like to thank the council for allowing me to come here tonight, and it's a situation that I've come up against that I wasn't really aware of as a citizen here in Ascension Parish. My daughter got ready to, I bought a trailer before the flood and everything, and the trailer come in during the flood and all that, so we had to wait till after the flood and to let everything settle down because I was flooded, and she went to get her permits to see what all we had to do. I'd built a pad to put the trailer on. We had the elevation and all that. So we went, and she come back home and come to find out she had to have a transportation impact fee to pay, which was $1,724. So I got to checking around, called a few of the council members to see what it was, and Mr. Dawson here was nice enough to send me a copy of it and all that. And I guess what I'm here about is that I think it's a situation where, you know, you kind of hold people hostage. I feel like my daughter's being held hostage. We got a place for her to stay, but because that she doesn't have the $1,724 needed to pay the transportation impact fee, which we moved the trailer on a piece of property that I give her, each of my children, I give each of them an acre back years ago. Through the Planning and Zoning Commission, through a family partition that it cost me back then to do that. And it's just, I don't think that it's a situation that is, I guess, bringing people, that would be condoning to bringing people to our parish. I mean, I'm a family man. My family's been raised here. I've been here since 1968. My parents live here. They still alive. And I got grandkids, and I'd like to see them grow up in Ascension Parish. And I was talking to Mr. Dawson and some of the things that I related to some of the council members that I can understand an impact fee, you know, for all the people that's coming in, building these big subdivisions out of parish and leaving the parish with a bunch of money in their pocket. But I expressed to him that a lot of the traffic that we have today is not traffic that is from our parish. I live on Highway 22. Just now coming to the meeting, I had to, you know, wait forever to get a break to get out on the road. Well, that's people that don't live in our parish, but they're using our roads. They're going through our parish. They're going to Livingston Parish. They're working in our parish. We have a situation that he said, well, you know, we discussed some options. What would you recommend?
Yeah. Can we get you to summarize, Mr. Phillips? Or?
Okay. I would like to see a variance, some way granted to me that would allow my daughter, you know, to be able to go ahead and proceed with getting her trailer hooked up, get the electricity hooked up, and, you know, be able to live in it. And I guess, in essence, that's what it is. That's what I'm asking for.
Oh, Mr. Phillips, can I ask you?
Mr. Dawson.
Yeah. Now, this is not a replacement. I know I'd ask you this, but I wanted to get it out. This is not a replacement for a house that flooded for her. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Because we do have, and Mr. Fournier can talk about that, we do have some provisions for that, but, you know, we're going to talk about some hardship cases for that tonight, but for people that are not replacing or people that are more in a situation like you.
Right. This is the property that the trailer is on is a piece of property that I give her that was originally has got a house on it. But when I divided it, I kept the piece. It's got a house on the other end of it, which was affected by the flood. You know, it belonged to me. It was a piece of rental property, and it was a portion of this property. But I mean, she wasn't living in it. You know, and like I expressed to you, I'm not coming here, you know, to fabricate a big story to let you know. But you know, it's all. I am what I am, and I come here, you know, to be honest and try to do things the right way, and ask for y'all's help in any way, you know, any type of help that you could give me, it would, you know, be greatly appreciated. And, you know, whether it's, I was hoping, I didn't know I had 3 minutes. I probably would have wrote down a few brief statements, you know, but I do appreciate y'all letting me come and speak.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I have one I want to read. Do you mind?
No, Ben, did you have something? Mr. Dawson.
I also have, and I'm not going to attach a name to this, but this is a lady that I talked to, and she also emailed me. And, you know, I'll just kind of summarize this a little bit. This is, she said and she's talking about her daughter. They just had a baby on September 27th. He was born with medical issues that required multiple surgeries after birth. We're doing everything we can to help them get on their feet, but it's so expensive. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I hope you'll be able to bring this to the board's attention, how we feel this fee is impacting some of the community and making a hardship on young families. So this is an email that I also received relative to this.
Okay, I'm not sure how to proceed on this individual case or even others, and I will state this for the record. However, I've received similar contacts, and I'm sure probably everyone sitting up here and the rest of the council who's not here tonight have probably gotten these types of things as well. I would say, Mr. Phillips, that of course this law was passed, and I don't believe it was passed with the intention to produce hardships, quote unquote, on individuals who have had property for decades or longer in the parish, and who have even saw fit to divide it up and keep their children here in Ascension Parish, of which I'm sure we're all thankful for that as well. It was done more for with the idea that these subdivisions that are building hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes at a time are producing tremendous burdens on the infrastructure of this parish, and not just roads. We also have a sewer impact fee. And there's some talk yet. Mr. Jerome Fournier is studying it with a group that the parish is authorized to pay money to look at even other potential vital infrastructure pieces besides drainage and transportation as well. And the reason for it, if you haven't done a lot of study of that, I'll just tell you, I don't have the numbers readily in front of me this evening, not knowing that you would be here to testify tonight. But I recall reading from the American Planning Association and other well-respected bodies all across the United States, large studies being done, particularly in the states of Georgia and Florida, that for every new home brought into a county, equivalent to our parishes in these states, the tax revenue generated by, on a per rooftop basis, if you will, is around $1.24. Yet the burden on these infrastructure pieces is double to triple that amount, $2 or $3 per household. So that was the reason for it. Now, as far as this body or this committee being able to grant you any relief tonight, I can pretty much assure you that can't happen, because we're a body that does strategic planning for the parish, and then we make recommendations to the full parish unless this body decides we want to change that law in any substantial way. And I think that's a good segue to what Councilman Dawson asked me when he requested putting an item on the agenda, that maybe there's some way we can get financial relief to people through, as you see the title of this item, grants or something of that nature. Shy of that, which is not in place, the word hardship always engenders going in front of the Board of Adjustments, which, by the way, they can grant, as you use the word, variances to land development codes. Our impact fee, brand new code notwithstanding, but I'm reasonably certain they've never heard a case like that yet, since it's all pretty new, and I don't know what they would do. And I would caution them that if they were to grant one, that would open the floodgate and probably set a precedent that we would have to be, after just, quote, the subdivision developer guys and not after individuals. And then there would be all kinds of probably crying and screaming that, well, wait, everything has an impact. Why does these people not have to pay and other people do? But I've said enough. Turn it back over to the to this committee for discussion.
I have
Mr. Dawson.
Well, I have a proposal, but first I'd like to Mr. Phillips and I talked a couple of times, but just to reiterate what we had talked about, which is that we can't exempt one class of people or one group of people from this impact fee. If we do, it puts the whole fee in jeopardy, because the law states that we have to enforce that equally across the parish. So everybody that has an impact or a traffic impact, we have to enforce it equally to each one of them, or we put the whole ordinance at risk. Now, having said that, I've talked with Mr. Fournier this morning, and we talked to Mr. Parrington, our legal advisor. And the recommendation that we came up with is that we could institute a hardship for people that legitimately have a hardship, and give them a discount on this fee, and then we could use another part of the Ascension Parish budget to reimburse the traffic impact fee fund, which is what Mr. Parrington had recommended, that we need to be able to keep the traffic impact fee fund whole, where we're not discounting what that fund receives, but the individual would be able to pay less than the $1,724 that you had mentioned. And I would like to recommend that we move forward with that and send that to. I would recommend that we send that to the administration, specifically to Mr. Fournier's group, and let them look at this a little bit further and bring a recommendation to the council.
Mr. Fournier, are you up to the task?
Yeah, we certainly are. We had a great meeting this morning with Councilmember Dawson and Parish Attorney Mr. Parrington, and we do feel that. I'd like to kind of discuss this a little bit more and bring you up to speed on where we are with the traffic impact fee program.
Please do so.
Use this opportunity. There are provisions in the ordinance that allow us to make exceptions and exemptions to the fee, and we have processed many of those. And what that allows is that if a property owner has had a damaged home or a trailer or whatever it is, and they're replacing a damaged home with another home, we can exempt them from the fee. If there's been a property owner who's had a unit on the lot that is of similar size and use, in other words, it's a residential use and they're not building a commercial structure on it, if it's residential to residential, we can, and that old unit was on the house within the last 5 years, we can give them an exemption according to the ordinance, and we have done that, all right? On some properties, they might be exchanging a single-wide trailer for a double-wide trailer, and in those instances, we take the difference in the square footage, and we do a calculation, and we reduce the fee, in fact, somewhat substantially for those property owners. So we have been having exemptions that we have processed since the program's been instituted. And with the flood recently, we've been a little bit more liberal in our interpretation. So because of some of the problems that property owners have had. But in Mr. Phillips' case, it's a vacant lot, and it has been a vacant lot for a substantial amount of time, much more than 5 years. And so in that case, there's no provision under the ordinance for me to give them an exemption, to the fee. So we will definitely work with council. I think the proposal that was developed this morning with Councilmember Dawson and Mr. Parrington is a good one, and we can work with council on developing, the criteria in order to apply for a grant. With that said, I'd like to give you a little update on where we are with the program. As you know, the fee program is divided into 3 different areas, zones 1, 2, and 3. Zone 1 is across the river in the western area, and we've just had one building permit that was for that tractor site, and we've collected $46,340 that's applicable to that fund, right? Area number 2, which is the southern part of the parish on the east bank, we've collected $399,416. And on Area 3, which is the northern part of the parish, Prairieville, we've collected a total of $17,562. So the total amount of money that we've collected so far with the program has been $1,162,318. That was as of yesterday, right? So we're pretty much. In addition to that, as you recall, the Parish Council has approved a contract with Duncan and Associates out of Austin, Texas, and they're the firm that prepared the report initially. And because the report was based on an older study, we felt that it was appropriate to go back and update it to make sure that we're in line with current technology, current thinking on impact fees. They're in the process of that. We got delayed because of the flood and everything that we're doing here. We've been in communication with Duncan and Associates within the last week or so. We've been giving them information, and 3 of the things that I have asked them to do and to look at as a priority for the program is, number 1, the hardships, as we're discussing tonight, and look at what's been done across the country in terms of how to deal with hardships, because there are some, and we know that other communities have dealt with those. The second item we looked at was industrial development. We don't want to hurt the industrial development of the parish by having a fee that might hinder industrial growth in the parish. So we're looking at that as well. And the third item is to look at how the 3 zones that we have, whether we want to look at them and keep them intact, whether we want to modify them or other things. So those are the 3 things that we'll be looking at, and hopefully we'll get an answer from them soon. As soon as we do, we'll report to council or come to a committee and give you a full report on that first, right?
Thank you, Jerome.
That's all
That sounds excellent. Let me try to summarize that for anyone that may be listening out there. If I'm understanding you correctly, we already have in place in our existing law, so that everybody will know, exemptions, I'm going to just call it for what you described as replacement housing, quote unquote, and that would be via apple-to-apple type comparisons in size. And then the segue was for those folks that don't have that, and which means it wouldn't help our public speaker tonight, Mr. Phillips, since the lot was vacant and not anything on it. We're going to be looking into, along with Mr. Parrington and Mr. Dawson, how we can maybe alter this law to do something with exemptions for hardships. And I would actually bless that and look, I would like that rather than putting this burden on our Board of Adjustments or any other group where it might wind up. And then the third thing, which I think was really music to my ears, I'm not in love necessarily with the 3 zones, so I wouldn't mind a relook at that. Hardship, we've already talked about, is number 2. And certainly, we don't want to be hurting industrial development in this parish, so we want to be very, very careful there. The only thing I would say is as y'all go through this, and I know you will, let's be absolutely certain that we don't undo hard work done to get to the instigation of the fees. We all know that had we done this 10 years ago, and it missed by 1 vote and several councils ago, we've already missed out on $20 million. To wit, tonight, I hear your testimony that we're already up. Did I get that number one? Right, a little over $1 million already?
Yes, sir.
That's just wonderful. That ought to help a great bit. So let's do the work, I guess. And Mr. Phillips, I assume you understand where we are in all this. I don't know what your time frame is relative to your needs with your family and when you can try to get things done. But I will tell you this: this parish will do its best to try to do this in a timely manner. I have every confidence in both Councilman Dawson, our legal counsel, Mr. Fournier, our director of planning and development, to get some things. And again, it was not our intention, at least certainly wasn't mine, although I did lead the charge along with several of my colleagues on this committee to instigate impact fees for obvious reasons. We're in traffic jams, we're flooding, we don't have parish-wide sewer. We're falling further and further behind. What I said earlier is real. Every time we add, even if we add judiciously and appropriately, the money generated from the addition does not offset the extra cost of the infrastructure and the burden that extra one home gives. And so as a result, this is a real vicious cycle, and it needs to be addressed and stopped or slowed anyways as best we can. Any other comments on the committee tonight? Mr. Joseph? Mr. Johnson? Mr. Dawson?
No.
Are we good for tonight? Now, we don't really need any kind of a motion or anything. You just have the administration, you guys, with the blessing of this committee, certainly begin that study. And
Yes, sir. We'll work with administration and get Mr. Dawson as well to give us comments.
I just want to thank Mr. and Ms. Phillips and Mr. Mack for coming. Appreciate your time.
yeah, thank you, sir. Moving along then, item number, let's see, 6 on the agenda. Am I in the right place? Yeah. Discussion of the bird ordinance for Ascension Parish. That would have been Councilman Aaron Lawler. He's not here tonight, so we'll rely a little heavier on Benny Johnson and the rest of this committee. Just a quick history. We don't have a burn ordinance in the Parish of Ascension. We've discussed this a couple times, and we've deferred it to get more input from the various fire chiefs. We have had both Chief Stewart and LeBlanc in front of us before, but I'm sure there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes contact with those individuals that I'm not even aware of. And we had decided that we were going to at least take a look at the Gonzales ordinance, which is in everybody's packet tonight. The city does have a burn ordinance. The parish does not. Maybe we'd model after that. Maybe we wouldn't. A serious bone of contention before I turn this over for discussion, as I recall the last time we looked at it, was that there was a sentence placed in there by Mr. Parrington, my legal counsel, talking about a minimum size of a lot, or as to whether you'd be allowed to burn or not. A lot of people didn't like that, myself included, because we have a long tradition in this parish of being a lot more rural than we are now, and people that have burned all their lives want to continue to burn. However, that said, how do we help where these subdivisions are going in? And I always offer the example in my district, because I'm most aware of it. On Highway 73, we have probably a dozen subdivisions: Seven Oaks, Longwood, Renaissance Village, Southwood Village, bunch more. And we're building another 200 lots right now as we speak in the halls of Dutchtown. That precipitated a lot of complaints to me. And I'm sure, again, everybody in this council would have their own stories to tell, where when they were developing that, they did open burning. The smoke and particulate matter getting all over the houses in the subdivisions I named people screaming, "Doc, you got to do something." My swimming pool, my house itself, I had to have power washers out here, professionally clean it. Cost me hundreds, thousands of dollars. I have an asthmatic child, so forth and so on. So that's where we were on it. And again, I hope we don't just say we don't need one. I know there's some issues. Mr. Fournier is probably going to talk about this momentarily as well with enforcement. We discussed that last time too. But there is a new kid on the block I at least want to share with everyone tonight. And if I could get maybe Jessica, you to cue that up on the overhead, and everyone else has it in their packets, and everybody can see this at home. A constituent who will go nameless, I like the way you did that, Bill, emailed me on my Facebook site, my campaign site, and told me that he had worked in another state for a highway department that did a whole lot of, called it slash burning and stuff, of trees and brush and stuff along right-of-ways on major highways in the state. And they were using something called a vortex air curtain, I probably don't have the correct terminology, force ventilated type burner. And he gave me a link, and that's what we're looking at up on the screen right now. And I'm not endorsing this company or anything. I'm really rather just using this as for illustrative purposes. They sell both what's called fireboxes, and the technological term that I keep hearing over and over again is what's called trench burners. And so if you take a look at the topmost picture there, the trench burner is a device that a contractor could hook up to his vehicle. You see a little trailer hitch on it there, and bring it on site. And he brings it onto some level ground. If you move it up a little bit, Jessica, you can see he'll then take a backhoe or an excavator and dig a trench. These trenches are pretty deep. I understand there's something like 8 feet deep, maybe 8 foot wide, varying in size. And the way to know how to actually lay that out, if you see that long arm right there, that came out of that device you saw in the previous picture. It was tucked away inside. You can just lay it in the ground like that and spray paint the size of the ditch that you want to cut. And then if you look in the final picture, Jessica, if you can move that up, the tree limbs and trunks and so forth, what have you, are pushed into there. And then that machine has a propane burning situation and a force ventilating, and there's other things that y'all can't see at home that I gave the committee that shows the actual technical parts of it. It winds up combusting the material, which I understand from their literature can be burned green. Doesn't even have to hold the developers up for it to dry out. It will take and burn as much as the numbers I saw on their literature, 20 tons of wooded material, and reduce it down to 400 pounds of sterile ash, which can then be, covered up in the hole there and left on site. It results in a very clean burn. The literature that I've given to the committee says well under 10% of the EPA method non-testing, as compared to open burning, which is what we have in the parish right now. I mean, they can just burn, and that typically runs at about 80 to as much as 100% opacity. And I literally, by the way, when they were starting the Dutchtown Hollows subdivision, went in off of 73 in that area, and trust me, I mean, it was blinding how bad it really was. So I offer to this committee the possibility that if we still have a problem with that sentence that O'Neill put in there about burning of a certain size, that could go away if we were to have an ordinance that specified as a replacement language that we would require developers, these aren't individuals, not homeowners, obviously, to use a air curtain, vortex, trench burner, whatever the correct terminology is, or equivalent. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Benny Johnson.
Last time we talked about going to having a meeting with the sheriff. I have not been able to do that. I have talked to some of the members of the sheriff's office, which would be the big concern as far as enforcement, because that would be the agency charged with enforcing that, as the firefighters have no enforcement authority. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Lawler about it. We haven't taken the opportunity to talk about it. I'm not sure if he's met with the sheriff or not concerning this. But as far as what you present to us tonight seems interesting. It looks like it would be a very good method of control. But other than that, I have really not much new to add to the discussion tonight, unfortunately.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Joseph? Mr. Dawson?
Okay. Well, I guess since we haven't talked to the enforcement people, I'm a little uncomfortable, moving on this tonight. But I also want to bring up the fact that the state has burning regulations, and I have a copy here, and it's readily accessible on the state's website. And actually, DEQ is the authority that they have the authority from the EPA, and this covers the open burning. It covers all the things that we talked about. So what I would ask is we need to look at the state statute and make sure that we're not doing anything in conflict with that first. And secondly, that, is this statute perhaps sufficient for us without having to pile on our own statute, on top of the state statute, And I represent a rural area. I'm not in favor of prohibiting the people that live in the rural parts of this parish from being able to burn twigs and leaves and that other type of material that they pick up in their yard. So, and this ordinance this law from the state allows that, under certain conditions. So, I guess if we need a motion, I'd make a motion that we postpone until Councilman Lawler, until we've had a chance to talk to the enforcement people like we had talked about 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay, I have a motion that we defer this item again, and I assume those types of motions, as I've said before, require a time frame, so that would be to the next meeting.
Well, when Councilman Lawler has it ready, I mean, we also have the...
Are you asking for a motion to postpone indefinitely? In which case, if it's never brought up again, it just dies? Or do you? I feel like we ought to put a time on it because we've already deferred it several times, and whether or not folks have done their homework or not, I'm not here to fuss about that.
Fire department, we have to talk to the
I would say this, Bill, that the state law, of course, would not cover forced use of trench burning for developers, as I've just described, number one. And then I don't believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the state I think you stated that, or the Gonzales ordinance stops burning of the twigs or anything of that nature. No. So I still think we need a law that does something to prevent me from getting a billion. I'm in the north part, unlike Bill, and we're highly developed, and we're developing more and more every day, as they are in Aaron Lawler's district, and that's why he's a supporter. 7 and Terry Casso in 8. So the northern part of the parish relative development is in the density is real high. One home right next to another one on small lots, not even half or full acres. It's almost like thou shalt not flood. Now everybody's interested in thou shalt not smoke thy neighbor out. And so that's what started it. So I'd still like to see us have something where we could have the best of both worlds. I'm confident we can get there if we try hard enough. Prevent the developers from, impinging upon that asthmatic child or causing damage to other people's property while they're building new stuff by the power washing and stuff, and yet let the folks in your district build in others. And there's still some rural areas, even in mine, burn the twigs and stuff. But I'll leave that up to the wisdom of this committee. If we're not prepared, we're not prepared. So do I hear a second to Mr. Dawson's motion? I do. Mr. Johnson is seconding that, and can I offer, even though Robert's rule says there's no such thing as a friendly amendment, that we do put a time frame on it, Bill? And just really would you like to work with Benny and Aaron on this to be sure it gets done?
We could put it well, we can put it on the agenda next time if they're not prepared.
I
We'll
hesitate to
postpone
put,
it again.
I hesitate to put 3 people on any kind of a subcommittee because that gets
I'm-
into the quorum issues. And,
No, I'm good with not being on that.
but you can still work with them behind the scenes, and I would expect you would do so to protect the interests of your constituency. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we defer this to the next meeting. Any further discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, this item will be taken up at the very next meeting again. Motion carries. Let's see. Our final item this evening, and my notice blinked. Item number 7 is the council travel reimbursement. I won't go into a lengthy history here because I know Mr. Joseph and Mr. Dawson are both on that sort of subcommittee and are prepared tonight to talk about that. Hopefully we can get to a fix. I'll just say what happened here was, and it all started this year when we all went up as a council to the NACO meeting in Washington, D.C., the National Association of Counties. And of course, a lot of other priest jury meetings. The council and other employees of the parish obviously have needs to travel. How they're being reimbursed right now is using a system that causes certain grief to the traveler from the standpoint that when you have to collect receipts and so forth, and then you lost a receipt, or whether we should have a per diem or not. This committee has discussed this at length. I know Mr. Joseph has brought another parish's ordinance as an example forward. We've looked at that. We've looked also at the state, which I liked because I was a former state employee and it seemed to work real well then. And I think others feel like, though, it's too cumbersome. Enough history. We'll stop there. And who should we go with first? Mr. Joseph, would you?
As you can see in your package, we have the current Ascension Parish travel policy, the current travel policy markup, and then you have the proposed travel policy that with the front or advance per diem, and then the administration have put a policy and procedure for employee travel. I just noticed that, and basic our policy, the one that we are proposing is everything is pretty much what the state have the guidelines. Every normal federal state government have in here is based on you report everything that you have, and if you set a per diem, which is on meals, per diem for meals, and that we're asking for advance. I think the question is, do we want to go to that procedure, do that advance, and base it on the set rate? I see also administration just gave me something today from just a while ago on the IRS, and I'm still trying to figure out what they're saying, but based on what I'm reading in it, reimbursable, I mean, advance pay is. The only problem is it can be taxable. You have to report it. And so, once again, unless anybody have any question, that's what I see in it. That's my statement, Bill. I know me and Bill disagree on one thing on it, so I'm gonna let Chairman, you don't mind, you see you, Mr. Bill.
The chair recognizes Bill Dawson.
Well, thank you. In looking at this, what was proposed was a per diem without backup by expenses, by documented expenses. So what I'm understanding the proposal was to give $75 a day, and that would be used for meals, etc. But you wouldn't have to come in and produce receipts to show whether you spent that or how it was spent. I'm opposed to that. Got a couple of, several reasons. One is that, as Oliver pointed out, this is the IRS policy, is that, that's counted as income. If you don't have receipts to back up what that per diem is as to what you actually spent, then the parish is obligated to report that on a 1099, and you'll be taxed on it. Secondly, as we also, I think as Jessica handed out today, this is in our charter, section 401. I'm sorry, section 404B. You know, I'll read this for you, and I think most everybody has that. The governing authority by ordinance may adopt a system of reimbursement upon presentation of properly documented receipts of reasonable expenses necessary to performance of official duty of the governing authority and in compliance with state law. So, you know, as I read that, it says it's a reimbursement. It's not a per diem that they hand you the money and turn your head. The final point that I have is that this policy, you know, what's proposed here is for the governing authority or for the council. The policy that, I have a copy of the policy that's for the other employees of Ascension Parish. And, you know, they have to produce receipts. They are only reimbursed for their expenses. So I think it's wrong for us to treat ourselves more favorably than the employees that we have in Ascension Parish.
Well, I thank both of you gentlemen, and I'm not sure how to or whether I even should get between you. I will say this, and then we'll go for round two. How about that?
All right.
As a state employee for over 30-something years at LSU, and I hope I'm not admitting to having broke the law. I only did what they told me I was supposed to do. It's interesting that we had a per diem. We were not required to show receipts. I have never, and I don't want to be audited for 30-something years, have had the state of Louisiana turn in, did you say a 1099 bill? Stating that Doc Sadley went to Switzerland or he went to Mississippi or somewhere even in the state of Louisiana, in and out of state travel. And I've been to probably 46 of the 50 states and maybe 19, 20 foreign countries. I can tell you this, you never make money traveling. You always wound up out of your pocket on top of what you can get back from the state, or in our case here, the local governing authority, the Parish of Ascension. That said, I understand laws, and I understand you have to abide by them, but I'm curious how the state has its travel policy, and they pay a per diem if it's outlawed by the federal government. Because the way I look at it, federal government trumps, no pun intended, state government, and state trumps local government. But I'm wondering if why do we need to fix something if we're now concluding what we currently have isn't broke? The answer, I guess, was as I started in the history, and maybe I didn't expand upon that enough. When you go traveling, half the time, you know, you're in a cab, and you might be going from the airport, and you've got 3 or 4 of your colleagues with you, and there's only one receipt, and you can't split the receipt by 5 people. And then when you go to a restaurant, and you've got 10 or 11 of us sitting there, a waitress will not give you separate checks because it's restaurant policy. And all these other things that we haven't talked about, but we have in the past, make it difficult to be in the receipt business, so to speak. Therefore, I concur more with Mr. Joseph on that one point than Mr. Dawson, that I'd like to see it made easy enough to where you're given so much per day and you make it work. Again, like I say, $75 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 99% of the time in the places that we go to conduct the business of this parish, or when I was an employee of the state of Louisiana as a college professor at LSU, never works out to be a positive thing for the traveler. But that said, I have a special privilege tonight as chairman. I'm supposed to be unbiased, although I am allowed to speak as I just did, according to the rules, and then we'll be admitted, I'm sure, voting one way or another. And I'll be able to withstand this. Mr. Joseph.
Yes. And I agree with Mr. Dawson on one thing. The council shouldn't be different than any other employees that's going on a road trip for government work. You're correct. There's no separate in this here. This policy, from what I'm in, if it interpret that way, this is for all parish employees. from the parish president on down to the lowest man on the pole. If he going to a road trip to get educated or any type of trip, then he have the right to get per diem in advance. He does. That's the way I see it. I agree with you on that. But the federal government, I mean, I'm like Doc. I was in the military. We did per diem, advanced per diem, based on what the federal government is. What we are ruling right now, we are falling within the state guidelines, which comply with the state law. You know, our governing authority says that. So we are doing it within the state law. And being taxed, I mean, welcome to America. Everyone get taxed for something. The other thing is that I'm pretty sure that Mr. Benny Johnson go over there right now, and I know you too, that worked in plants. And every guy that is out 100-mile radius get per diem when they come work at a plant most of the time for contracting. You know? And they get paid, they don't get no receipts. I mean, the federal government have put guidelines that you can get paid for it. Unfortunately, you have to pay taxes on it, okay? Now, I think that's where the choice, this government body gonna have to ask that question if we move this forward. Do they wanna pay the taxes? Because everything else is legal. The only thing is being taxed. And I'm saying that we go on about 3 or 4 trips, really, 3 trips a year. And if we go to per diem for the Washington, D.C., it's more than $75. And per diem on meals. All we talking about is meals. If we go to the state of California, it's more. In the state of Louisiana, if we go to New Orleans, it's more than $75. If we go to a rural area, yes, it's either we follow the guidelines of the federal government's rates or we make our own rates. And our rates are a whole lot cheaper based on where we go at. So that's my standing on it, and I would just like this to move forward and have the full council make that decision. That's all I have done.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to add?
You want to get in this fray?
I'll get in the fray. I'm kind of on the fence. I mean, I agree with what both gentlemen are saying, but I will say this. Looking at the parish travel policy right now, that's in our packet. Second to last item on the travel advances, the parish administration has the discretion to authorize a travel advance. So it says right there that, at least for parish employees, the parish president has the ability to authorize advances to the employees. I think we're walking kind of a fine line here to a certain extent. We go out of town, and like Councilman Joseph just alluded to, when you're talking about going to any fancy restaurants, you go to a cafe or something like that, just to eat lunch and dinner, you're going to spend, you eat, especially in Washington, D.C., you eat breakfast in a hotel, that's $20, just about, and that's outside the policy.
25.
And so either we have to up the amounts we're talking about to cover this stuff and still provide the receipts, but there's also a little bit about convenience as well that I think we can do. I've never been on a long-term assignment outside with the company that I work for, but I have been on short trips, and one of the things that we can do is that we can lump everybody together on a check as long as we put people's names on it. And I find it kind of out there that if we go to lunch during a conference, the 4 of us sit down at a table and one of us is willing to pick up that expense and turn it in with the 4 names on it, why we can't get reimbursed for that. Now, I fully understand about spouses or anything along those lines. That's not covered, and it shouldn't be. But if the per diem would cover things along those lines, I don't see an issue with it. It's a little bit about convenience, but it's also about trying to make sure that we take care of what the public's interests are in this, and we don't have someone abuse the privilege of what we are here to do. And
with the per diem where it's at, I don't see that as being a major concern in the sense that the conferences that I've been to, especially when you talk about, there's few cities that can manage even a local police jury conference here in the state of Louisiana. You're going to Shreveport, you're going to Lake Charles, you're going to New Orleans, Alexandria, something like that. You're going to pay a decent amount for food during the day. When you get out of state and using taxis and transportation, those kind of things, it gets expensive pretty quick. So I like the conversation of where it's going. Right now, I'm tending to lean towards the per diem, but we may have some issues to overcome with some of that, and looking at the charter as well as. Sounds like the state law we're in compliance with, may be some stuff within there within the feds that we may have to take a little bit closer look at. And I look forward to some more discussion on it for sure, but I don't see a reason we can't send something to the council and have a little bit further discussion along with the rest of our fellow members.
So,
And I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Dawson.
Okay. Well, first, I didn't mean to imply that anything that about the per diem was illegal. It's not illegal. It's just that it's taxable, if you don't have expenses if you don't have the receipts to justify it or to back it up. Secondly, you talk about an advance. That's a different subject, and that's completely acceptable. An advance implies that going to give you X amount of money, whether it's $50 or $75, and then you come back and produce receipts over what you've spent. And, if you had a $75 advance, you had receipts for $55, and you'd have to give back $20. So, but we're not talking about an advance here. We're talking about, just giving somebody $75 a day when they're on a trip. I think one of the salient factors here is that the charter, is pretty clear about that. And it says that, it has to be a system of reimbursement upon presentation of properly documented receipts. So, if we don't have a system that's reimbursement and based on receipts, then we're not in compliance with the charter. My opinion on reading those words. I think the last thing is that I have taken the current policy and made a few modifications to that whereby, and I agree with you that if there are more than one of us at a table, we should be able to get one bill and split that up. So I've put that in, I've made some language changes for that. I know that we're not going to settle this tonight, and I'm in favor if we want to take it to the full council without a specific recommendation, just take the discussion to the full council, then I would make that motion.
and I'll second that motion that we send it to the full council for discussion.
So you're seconding a motion that you changing the language of, OJ, or is that okay with you, Bill? Just
Well, there's no
for discussion?
recommendation, we're just going for.
So we're not going to send any of the materials that's in our
No.
packet? This is just saying, we as a committee would like the full council to discuss this.
We go
Above our pay grade.
Put that on the agenda, put it on the agenda on
for
one.
discussion.
I think we send the supporting documents of both sides of the situation we're talking about to everybody, and preferably do that after tomorrow or as soon as the secretary potentially can. And that way we get it on the next council agenda or first council agenda for next year and have a discussion on it and find out which way the full body wants to go. I'm in agreement. I'll support that motion. I just think we need to go ahead and get the information. Everybody let them have a little bit of time to digest it and maybe have some conversations amongst ourselves as to which way we want to try to go with this.
So to be clear, I'm sure the chair understands the motion. I'm supposed to restate it, and I'll try. This committee would like to send this item for discussion purposes only to the full council at their next regularly scheduled meeting with the underlying materials that are in our package that will show the work we've done up to this stage and then let the full body discuss it and decide whether or not we're going to change our existing travel.
I'd like to make a correction. I didn't mean that to be for discussion only, so there could be an action there. It's just that we're not making a
So
recommendation.
for discussion and potential action to the
Yeah.
full, did you
We're
get
not
it,
making a
Jessica?
recommendation.
You got it, Jessica?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's been moved by Mr. Dawson, second by Mr. Joseph, that we do what I just said. And any discussion on that? Any objection? Before slapping the gavel and saying motion carried, I will just say this. Mr. Dawson, looking at section 404 compensation, part B, where it says that we have to have a system, we do. Right now, the system says you have to have a receipt to back up that one issue of the per diem of $75, which is exclusively for meals. But the next sentence, my construction would be upon presentation of properly documented receipts. I wasn't there. I didn't make this law, but I would think that they were probably talking about plane tickets, hotel bills, and larger things, because again, I'm just going to reiterate one more time, not in addition to, I hear Mr. Joseph laughing about the military. As a professor, I sure hope I didn't violate 35 years worth of
Well, that's not the law. That's the
well, I mean,
order of
we never turned anything into the federal government, and we were given a little card. It was funny, because every year, I'll say this, the card changed colors. That way you knew you had the most recent rules and regs governing the travel. One year it'd be pink, one year it'd be orange, one year it'd be green. And in that card, it had high-cost areas, and it had what's been a discussion tonight in low-cost areas. New Orleans versus, who can we pick on?
DC?
Ruston. Well, just in state, okay, and the latter being a low cost, and so the per diem was, let's say, 75 and 55 or whatever. And you got that, and there was nothing to the federal government, but we'll see. I'm sure that there's always wisdom in the group, hopefully more wisdom in larger than smaller groups. So we'll be sending this, it sounds like, to the full council. Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
We have a move to adjourn,
Second.
and seconded. We are adjourned.